When the wealthy family came to adopt, my elder sister decisively left with them, leaving me to depend on each other with my grandmother. She thought she would enjoy wealth and prosperity from then on. As a result, the wealthy family's elder brother was a madman who abused her every day. Her parents were biased and only scolded and beat her. In the end, she went crazy, stabbed the whole family, and was arrested by the police. However, I became the youngest academician at the Academy of Agricultural Sciences. I cultivated high-end wheat, was nominated for a special award, and had a bright future. My elder sister escaped from prison and broke into the award presentation scene, killing me out of hatred. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day of the wealthy family's adoption. My elder sister rushed into my grandmother's arms first, with a venomous look in her eyes. "Sister, this time, it's your turn to go to hell." But she didn't know that no matter which path one chooses, without using one's brain, it's a dead end. And my dream has always been only one dash, to develop agriculture and change the world. Have you made up your minds? Which one of you wants to come with me? In the shabby hut, there stood a well-dressed couple. The woman looked at us gently and asked softly. They were a prominent wealthy family in N City, surnamed Frank. They came this time to choose a child to adopt from my elder sister and me. Linda was stunned for a moment, her eyes filled with ecstasy. Then she pushed me away and turned to jump into my grandmother's arms, pouting, "I want to stay with Grandma." The woman turned her gaze to me, smiled and said gently, "So you will come with us, right?" Linda chimed in, "Yes, yes, let my sister go home with you." Grandma was rarely treated so affectionately by Linda. She was a bit startled and uncomfortably reached out to touch the top of her hair. Previously, Linda disliked Grandma for being poor and always bossed her around, calling her an old hag. Even when she had a craving, she would wake up the elderly Grandma in the middle of a heavy rain night and order Grandma to buy things for her. Grandma was a bit strange. She knew that Linda loved wealth and despised poverty and had always been dissatisfied with the family's poverty. Why, this time when the rich people came to the house to adopt a child, Linda, contrary to her usual behavior, didn't choose to leave with the wealthy family but wanted to stay at home. Grandma couldn't figure out why Linda, for the first time, chose to stay in this poor home. However, I knew exactly why. Because both Linda and I were reborn. I knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times heavily to Grandma. "Grandma, thank you for taking care of me for so many years. As long as I have the chance, I will definitely repay you." After kowtowing, I stood up. I walked calmly towards the Frank couple. "I'll come with you." In my previous life, my elder sister took the lead and rushed into the Frank couple's arms, decisively choosing to leave with them. She thought that by entering the affluent Frank family, from then on, she would have a happy and princess-like life. But she didn't know that the Frank family had ulterior motives for adopting a daughter. The Frank family had a son named Jack. He had a dignified appearance and was good looking. Unfortunately, he was a madman with bipolar disorder. When my elder sister Linda entered the Frank family, what awaited her was not the meticulous care of the wealthy parents or the overbearing doting of the elder brother, it was the abuse of the madman. When the Frank family's parents saw that Jack's condition had stabilized somewhat, they decided to send Jack to school. But they were worried that Jack wouldn't get used to it in school alone, so they decided to adopt a child. On the first day Linda entered the Frank family, she was full of joy and wanted to build a good relationship with Jack. But Jack hated the stranger who suddenly appeared in the family. Instead of greeting her with a smile, he directly slapped Linda. The Frank family's parents were used to it and didn't pay any attention to the redness and swelling on Linda's face. They just coldly ordered her to take good care of her elder brother. At school, the classmates also looked down on Linda as an adopted daughter. The young Master Charles took the lead in bullying Linda, and she had a miserable life at school. When she got home, once the Frank family's parents found out that Jack had an episode at school and got hurt, they would whip Linda with a cane and punish her to kneel all night. Linda had a hard time. In contrast, my life was very peaceful. After Linda left, Grandma gave me all her love wholeheartedly. I studied hard at school every day and helped Grandma sell baked sweet potatoes after school. Although life was hard, I felt very happy. Later, an academician from the Academy of Agricultural Sciences came to the school for an inspection and took a fancy to me at a glance. I lived up to expectations, was admitted to an agricultural school all the way, entered the Academy of Agricultural Sciences, did experiments with the academician, and cultivated high-end wheat varieties. Even because of this, I was nominated as a candidate for the youngest top science and technology award. I had a bright future and was in the limelight, and Linda, because of the torture, went crazy, stabbed the whole family, and was arrested and imprisoned by the police. Unfortunately, I didn't succeed in stepping onto the award presentation stage. On the day of the award ceremony, Linda escaped from prison, seeing me being crowded in the middle by everyone. She was so jealous that her eyes turned red and she stabbed me more than a dozen times like a madman. So in this new life, she didn't hesitate to choose to stay with Grandma and was determined to push me into the abyss of the Frank family. When I walked out of the door, I looked back. Grandma looked at me reluctantly, her face full of unwilling, and my elder sister Linda, leaning in Grandma's arms, looked at me with full of venom in her eyes. She sneered, "Sister, this time it's your turn to go to hell." She was certain that I, who entered the Frank family, would suffer as much as she did in her previous life. But as Linda, who has died once, still not understood, no matter which path one chooses, people like her, who don't use their brains, have only a dead end. Linda guessed right. On the first day I entered the Frank family, I knew that Jack was a complete madman. The parents brought me home and pulled me in front of a handsome and deep-eyed teenager. They looked at Jack and said softly, "Jack, from now on, she will be your younger sister. When you go to school, she will take good care of you." After that, Mrs. Frank pushed me forward and showed me in front of Jack like a toy. "Your task from now on is to take good care of your elder brother and not let him get hurt at all. Do you hear me?" I looked at the teenager in front of me. "Got it." After the Frank family's parents left, Jack walked up to me lazily, looked me up and down condescendingly. After a while, he sneered, "What a thing, how dare you be my sister?" The next moment, he reached out and forcefully slammed my head onto the table. There was a huge bang. His eyes were full of violence, and he looked at me contemptuously, as if looking at a tiny ant. Idiot. At this time, Mrs. Frank, who had forgotten something, happened to turn around and come back. Seeing me being pinned to the table by Jack, with my neck in his hands and looking in a sorry state, she didn't show any surprised expression either. She just picked up the thing. When passing by Jack, she glanced at me and said indifferently, "Sarah, keep an eye on him carefully. Don't let your elder brother get hurt." My neck was pinched, so I could only roll my eyes to look at Jack and replied softly, "Got it, I will take good care of him." Looking at the seemingly caring but actually indifferent appearance of the Frank family's parents towards Jack, I felt sorry for Jack. So, the Frank family's parents were busy on business trips and soon left. After confirming that they had really left, I reached out, grabbed Jack's hair, and pulled it down hard. My voice was calm. "Let me go, brainless madman." Jack winced in pain because of my action. He couldn't help but let go of his hand and glared at me angrily. "How dare you scold me? I'll tell Mom and Dad to kick you out." I walked around Jack, smiled and said, "Just now Mom saw that you were pinching me, and I didn't even dare to resist, so how dare I scold you, big brother?" When going upstairs, I warned Jack, "You'd better behave yourself and not cause trouble before Mom and Dad come back." After that, I ignored Jack's incredulous expression and left directly. Even when Jack was slamming the door outside angrily, making a deafening noise, I didn't budge. Linda was not only satisfied with pushing me into the abyss, she started a live broadcast, put on a vulnerable look, and held up her phone to record with tears in her eyes. Linda had a pure appearance. At this time, her black hair was hanging down, making her look even more innocent. She said, "My sister and I were brought up by Grandma since we were young. I have deep feelings for Grandma. When choosing between the affluent life of the wealthy family and the long-lasting company of family affection, because Grandma is in poor health, I still decided to stay with Grandma, hoping to accompany her more." After that, Linda paused and smiled bitterly, "But my sister chose to enter the wealthy family without looking back, not caring at all about Grandma's future life. I really think she is a cold-hearted person." Seeing that more and more people were paying attention to the live broadcast room, after listening to Linda's words, many people were led by the public opinion and unceremoniously scolded me as an ungrateful person. Linda quickly explained, "I'm not saying that my sister's approach is wrong. Of course I know that when there is a choice, choosing wealth is human nature. I can understand her approach, of course." Linda tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said softly, "I will always stay with Grandma." Linda stared at the phone screen and showed a smile like the only pure white flower growing in the desert. She clenched her fist as if cheering herself on. "I will live a good life with Grandma." Looking at Linda's pure and harmless appearance, many netizens felt sorry for her. This live broadcast of hers was also recorded as a video and spread. For a while, everyone was praising her as a white flower blooming in the mud. And I was the greedy and snobbish ungrateful person. Not surprisingly, almost all the classmates at school had seen this widely spread video. The young Master Charles was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He had never seen such a stubborn girl who, when faced with the choice between money and family affection, unhesitatingly chose family affection. Not only that, she was also strong and harmless. In contrast, I, the snobbish younger sister who loved wealth and despised poverty, seemed even more vicious and treacherous. Charles had always looked down on people as Philistine as me, so he led people and swaggeringly blocked me at the toilet door. Charles was smoking a cigarette, squatting in front of me, looking at me condescendingly. He exhaled a puff of smoke in my face. "Look at you, such a dirty bug. How dare you come to this school to study?" Charles shook off the ash. The next moment, he directly pressed the lit cigarette butt on my arm. I was held down and couldn't move. I could only watch helplessly as Charles's cigarette butt burned on my skin. With a sizzling sound, a red and swollen blister soon appeared. Seeing the scene, the boys around let out a strange, sarcastic laugh. Linda was called over and happened to see this scene. Immediately, she widened her eyes and covered her mouth in surprise. "How could you do this?" Charles looked up, stood up lazily, walked up to Linda, and chuckled. "Hey, little thing. The young master is avenging you, don't you like it?" Linda quickly glanced at me and hid the pride in her eyes. Instead, she stamped her foot and looked at Charles angrily. "I don't like it, it's too much." Charles saw Linda wrinkling her nose, sneered, pulled her arm, and put his arm around her shoulder to walk out. "Don't like it, I'll change it next time." Linda's voice was coquettish. "Charles, how could you treat your classmates like this?" "No way." When passing the corner, Linda quietly looked back and scanned me contemptuously. Naturally, she was proud. In her previous life, Charles was the one who bullied her the most at school. In this life, with a change of identity, Charles instead liked her and helped her bully me. But, elder sister, in this new life, relying on men, is this your only means? In the first few days when Jack first came to school, he behaved very calmly, kept to himself, and didn't cause trouble. But when I returned to the classroom after handing in the test paper, I found that the ground was in a mess. Jack's desk had been overturned, and his books were scattered all over the floor. Jack was gone too. The classmates' eyes were still full of horror. They said, Jack was sitting quietly at first, but then he suddenly went crazy and smashed everything within his reach. I found Jack in an empty classroom. The teachers were standing at the door tentatively, but none of them dared to go in. He was sitting calmly on the only stool in the middle of the classroom, with bottomless violence hidden under his eyes. When Linda saw this scene, venom flashed across her face. The scenes of being abused by Jack when he went crazy in her previous life were still vivid in her mind. She screamed in horror. "Jack is a madman. He's sick. After taking care of Jack for so long, doesn't she know that people with bipolar disorder should not be stimulated?" I stepped forward and slapped Linda hard, ordering her, "Shut up, don't say a word." She was pushed against the wall by me. Linda's eyes widened. She was about to scream, but the next second, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Charles and his followers coming from the corridor. Linda's eyes turned, and she started to sob and cry. "Why are you bullying me?" Charles saw this scene. He tightened his jaw and walked over angrily. "Hey, Sarah, do you want to die?" But I didn't pay any attention to Charles at all. I turned around and stepped into the classroom that no one dared to enter, slamming the door behind me, facing Jack's suddenly raised terrifying eyes. My eyes were calm, and I held out the medicine bottle in my hand. "Take the medicine." Jack's voice was cold, and he said rudely, "Get out." Seeing me approaching step by step, Jack's fingers curled up. The next moment, he stood up, grabbed my neck, and threw me to the ground. Jack's eyes were blood red, and he growled from his throat. I said, "Get out." I was not at all surprised by this situation, but this was school, not in the Frank family, not a place where Jack could act wild at will. After working on the farm with Grandma for many years, let alone anything else, I really had great strength. I silently break open Jack's hand, grabbed his collar, and directly turned over and pinned him to the ground. I pressed Jack down and said word by word. I said, "Take the medicine." At this moment, Jack's bipolar disorder had flared up, and he couldn't listen to a word I said. He struggled and was about to get up. "How dare you treat me like this? I'll tell Mom and Dad to kick you out." My voice was cold. Whatever, if it weren't for the fact that Grandma owed the Frank family a debt of gratitude and wanted to repay it, I wouldn't have obediently followed the Frank family and left. Jack couldn't beat me, his eyes were fierce, and he opened his mouth and bit my arm. He didn't hold back. In an instant, blood gushed out from my arm, but I didn't indulge him. I punched him hard in the face and started to wrestle with him, covered in blood. Jack had just vented his anger, and now he was already out of strength. In the end, he was pinned to the ground with his hands tied behind his back and was forced to swallow the medicine. Jack glared at me with hatred in his eyes. "Sarah, you're crazy." I slapped him without mercy. "It's you who are crazy, idiot." Because Jack had an episode at school this time, almost everyone knew that Jack had bipolar disorder. Linda even spread the word at school, saying that Jack was a madman, violent and cruel, and that everyone should stay away from him. When Charles asked about it, tears immediately welled up in Linda's eyes. With a tearful look, she said, "Jack is a very scary person. I once saw him bullying others. I just want the classmates to stay away from him so that they can be safe." Upon hearing this, the slight awkwardness in Charles's heart vanished instantly, and he thought even more that Linda was kind. He put his arm around Linda, waved his hand, and said bravely, "Don't be afraid, stay with me, and I won't let you be bullied." Hearing this, Linda showed a shy expression, her face turned red, and she gently hit Charles's arm, coquettishly saying, "What are you talking about?" Because of what Linda had spread, Jack was already unsociable, and now, no one dared to get close to him, only I. At school, still kept an eye on Jack as usual and supervised him to take his medicine on time. Jack was very impatient with me. He scolded me more than once and told me to get lost. I watched Jack swallow the medicine, took the medicine bottle, and turned to leave, saying, "I don't want to be near you," because last time when Jack had an episode, I was impatient and slapped Linda. Charles saw it, and he thought I was bullying Linda, so he hated me even more. At school, I often found that my desks and chairs were written with words like bitch and whore in marker pen. When I went to the cafeteria to eat, someone would deliberately bump into me, causing the food to spill all over me. Even when I went out occasionally and came back, I could find snakes, mice, cockroaches, etc. in my school bag. Sometimes they were dead, and sometimes they were alive. Seeing me freeze, Charles leaned on the windowsill and laughed heartily with his followers. I remained calm, walked over, and directly stuffed the things back into his school uniform collar as they were. Charles let out a terrified scream, jumped around, and shook the mouse out of his clothes. He cursed at me. "Are you crazy?" I didn't say a word and turned back to my seat. Charles looked at me sinisterly and glared at me, saying, "I'm going to kill you." Charles and his group had the advantage in numbers. I always avoided them. If I could avoid them, I would have a peaceful day. If I couldn't avoid them and they caught me, I would be a bit embarrassed. But I never begged Charles for mercy, even when he was stepping on my hand and looking at me arrogantly, saying, "Sarah, you have a tough mouth, don't you?" I was in so much pain that cold sweat broke out all over my body, but I remained silent. Finally, Charles thought it was boring and turned around to leave with his followers. I slowly got up from the ground, leaned against the wall, stared at Charles's back, and said in a hoarse voice, "Charles, if you have a chance, you'd better kill me, otherwise, I will drag you to hell with me." Hearing this, Charles turned back contemptuously and said, "Idiot, do you really think you're amazing just by saying a tough word?" Then, there was a burst of laughter from a group of boys. Jack often saw the scenes where Charles bullied me, but he just gave me an indifferent glance and then turned away indifferently. Seeing this, Linda patted my face with a smile and sneered, "Sarah, you're so eager to be Jack's dog, but he has never taken you to heart." I didn't have the strength to hit Linda at this moment. I could only lean against the wall to catch my breath. After catching my breath, I raised my foot and kicked Linda hard. She let out a terrified scream, took a few steps back, and glared at me angrily, saying, "Bitch, why don't you die?" Then, she seemed to think of something and giggled. She was extremely proud and said, "It's not the time yet, my dear sister. Just wait to fall into a long nightmare without seeing the light of day." Jack and Charles got into a fight. When I arrived, the two of them were already fighting in a mess in the classroom. Both of them were injured. One was from the prominent Frank family in N City, and the other was the young master of the James family. When these two fought, no one dared to step in to stop the fight, for fear of being accidentally injured. The head teacher was also pacing back and forth anxiously at the door. I glanced at Linda, who was hiding at the door, covering her mouth and watching the scene with excitement. It was obvious that since these two people who had no previous interaction would fight for no apparent reason, she must have instigated it. When Linda saw me appear, she smiled triumphantly, showing a row of white teeth, and said, "The parents of the Frank family are back from their business trip. Guess what they will do when they learn that Jack has been in a fight? Sister, you're done for." I felt annoyed just by looking at Linda, so I raised my hand and slapped her hard, saying, done for, without Charles protecting you now. Why don't you realize that you're going to get beaten? After hitting her, I completely ignored Linda's screams behind me. I raised my foot and walked into the classroom. Jack's bipolar disorder flared up again at this moment. His eyes were scarlet, and his hands were tightly holding Charles's neck. Charles was also a person who wouldn't show weakness. He pinned Jack to the ground and punched him in the face one after another. I stood aside, picked up a long stick, and without mercy, smashed it on Charles's head, with a bang sound. Charles was hit by this blow and rolled his eyes, losing consciousness. I threw away the stick and felt extremely relieved. The teacher outside saw this scene and let out a terrified scream, saying, "This child Sarah is so bold. Hurry up, send Charles to the infirmary." Seeing that Charles had passed out, but Jack still stubbornly refused to let go of Charles's neck, I was afraid that he would really strangle Charles to death. I could only hold Jack down and break open his fingers one by one, soothing him. "Calm down, Jack." Jack's eyes turned, and he stared at me fiercely, as if he wanted to punch me too. I took the initiative and pinned Jack's hands behind his back, restraining him. "Calm down." Jack was not willing to give up. He struggled a few times, opened his mouth, and bit my arm. Damn it, he bit me again. "Is he a dog?" I spoke very quickly. "I'm now the only person you know at school. I have your medicine. And I can take good care of you, so calm down, okay? Be good. I won't let anyone bully you again." Listening to my soothing words, perhaps because Jack tasted the smell of blood in his mouth, his scarlet eyes stared at me intently, and he slowly released his bite. This incident caused a big stir. The teacher invited the parents of both parties to the school. The parents of the James family looked at the injuries on Charles and smiled a forced smile at the parents of the Frank family, saying, "Your adopted daughter really hit hard." Hearing this, Mr. Frank glanced at me sideways, raised his hand, and slapped me hard without mercy. In an instant, my cheeks swelled up immediately, and I almost tasted the faint smell of blood from the broken skin in my mouth. Mr. Frank smiled and said, "Yes, this child can't be tamed well. She hit too hard. I'm really sorry." In front of the James family, Mr. Frank severely scolded me. Then, he told me to get out, saying that he would have a good talk with the people from the James family. Just as I was going out, Mr. Frank patted my shoulder and said softly, "Well done." Seeing me go out with a swollen face, Linda's eyes curved, and she giggled triumphantly. She covered her lips gloatingly and said, "Sister, you're finished. You'll be whipped and punished to kneel when you get back. You won't be spared any of it, and since that madman had an episode, you might be tortured terribly by him." I felt annoyed just by looking at her. I grabbed Linda's neck, threw her against the wall, and looked at her coldly, saying, "Watch your mouth. He's just ill, not a madman." Linda was choked by me and had difficulty breathing. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Her face turned red, and she kept slapping my hand, saying, "You're really a good dog of Jack's, protecting your master like this." At this moment, Charles walked out of the office with a gloomy face, seeing me choking Linda. He stepped forward and pulled us apart, looking impatient. "You're bullying your sister again. You're so vicious," with the old score of being hit by me with that stick added. At this moment, Charles's eyes looking at me were cold. He stared at me coldly and said, "You've really provoked me this time, Sarah." I curved my eyes, looked at the two people in front of me, and said with a smile, "Do you want to kill me? What a pity, it's too late." Jack walked out of the door calmly. He lifted his eyelids, grabbed the back of my collar, and pulled me out, saying, "Sarah, let's go." Seeing this scene, Linda's eyes widened in shock, almost full of disbelief. "It's impossible. When did you get so close to him?" I ignored her. I shook off Jack's hand, frowned, and looked at him, saying, "Are you crazy?" Jack stopped in his tracks, and his expression looking at me was a bit awkward. He moved his mouth but didn't say anything. He raised his leg and walked straight ahead. I looked at Jack warily and felt that something was wrong with him. There must be something fishy when things go against the norm. After thinking for a while, Jack took a deep breath and said, I heard that when that innocent-looking bitch called me a madman, you were harsh on her. Why did you help me? Jack seemed a bit confused. I'm not nice to you. I let out an, oh, and said, I just didn't like her and wanted to find an excuse to teach her a lesson. Besides, I frowned, stared at Jack, and was also truly confused. I've always called you a madman. Jack seemed to have unilaterally started a cold war with me. This was my inference, because before, when I supervised Jack to take his medicine, he would also mock me, saying, idiot. Sometimes he would go against me and deliberately knock the medicine over. But now, Jack didn't even look at me. He took the medicine coldly, tilted his head back, and swallowed it, although I didn't know what he was going crazy about this time. But I thought this Jack was much more worry-free. After he took the medicine, I directly went back to my seat and continued doing my homework. Thanks to Linda's choice in this life, although Jack was a madman, the Frank family never treated me badly in terms of money. In my previous life, I went to school during the day and helped Grandma sell baked sweet potatoes at night. I didn't have money and couldn't bear to buy teaching aids and reference materials. The exercise books were all bought at a low price from senior students. I wrote and drew in one exercise book and went over it several times before I was willing to put it down. But now, there was a nanny at home to take care of things, and a driver to pick me up and drop me off at school. Every month, Mrs. Frank would transfer a large sum of money to my account. I didn't need to worry about not having enough money at all. On the contrary, Linda's life was much more difficult. Grandma was old, and she went out to sell baked sweet potatoes in the cold wind every day, but she couldn't earn much money. She lived on the poverty subsidy every month, but having been used to a comfortable life in her previous life, she was now suddenly back to a life of shortage of food and clothing. And she was in a very difficult situation. Linda's academic performance was not good originally, and her future was bleak. Now she could only rely on Charles's love for her to regain a bit of faith in the future. When Linda occasionally went back home, she often angrily accused Grandma, saying, old thing, why can't you get any money? Go out and earn money quickly. Considering that Grandma was old, I was worried that she would overwork and damage her health. I specifically saved up my pocket money every month. When Linda wasn't at home, I stuffed the money to Grandma. I told her, buy whatever is lacking at home, but don't spoil Linda, and don't let her boss you around all the time. Be obedient, Grandma. Grandma took my hand, and her cloudy eyes looked at me with guilt, saying, Sarah, it's Grandma who is useless. I'm old and can't earn money. Instead, I had to send you away. Sarah, don't be bullied outside. My eyes became hot, and I held Grandma's hand back, smiling and saying, Grandma, I'm living a good life now. Mom and Dad are very kind to me, and my brother is also very good to me. I won't be bullied. Grandma seemed to be relieved. She slowly patted my hand and said, that's good, that's good. When I was leaving, Grandma held me back and insisted on giving me a bag of sweet potatoes. These were grown by Grandma herself. They are healthy. Take them back and let your parents eat them. I couldn't refuse, so I had to take it in my hand. Grandma, I'll come to see you next time. Remember to take good care of yourself. Grandma stood at the door and watched me go away. She waved at me with a smile and said, Grandma is waiting for you. When I got home, I saw Jack sitting on the sofa downstairs, flipping through a book restlessly. When he saw me come back, his tone was a bit dissatisfied. Where did you go? Why didn't you wait for me after school? Seeing me come in with a dirty plastic bag full of soil, Jack's expression became even more disdainful. What's this? It looks so dirty. I was too lazy to pay attention to Jack. I walked into the kitchen, washed and dried the sweet potatoes. Jack followed me in, crossed his arms, and stood aside arrogantly. What did you buy these for? I went to see Grandma today. These were grown by her. Jack had heard about my things and snorted, seeing me turn on the stove. He stuck out his neck and reluctantly said, Hey, Sarah, I want to try some too. I didn't add any seasonings. I just put the sweet potatoes in clean water and boiled them. Jack frowned, picked at the skin with a fork fastidiously, and tasted a bite tentatively. It's just a so-so. The taste is okay. Your grandma grows them well. Looking at Jack's awkward appearance, for the first time, I thought he wasn't that anymore. When going upstairs, I casually patted the top of his head like I was patting a dog and said, Finish eating, don't waste it. Jack's eyes widened, and he took a deep breath. Sarah, how dare you? Since the last time when the parents were summoned to school, Charles managed to behave himself at school for a while. However, every time I passed by, I could notice. The way he stared at me was cold, as if he was plotting something. Similarly, Linda also quieted down. But the look in her eyes when she stared at me was as venomous as ever. Why aren't you being put in detention? Why didn't you get beaten? Sarah, what on earth did you do? I looked at her and smiled slightly. Do you want to know? The next moment, I grabbed the back of her neck, stood on the stairs, bent down, and whispered in her ear, then kneeled down and begged me, Sister, in fact, the answer is very simple. One needs to understand clearly what each character wants. The parents of the Frank family are too busy with work, so they want someone to take care of their children at school and keep their lives stable. Jack has been neglected since childhood, so he hopes to have someone to accompany him and care about him. I just hope to spend my school life quietly. Use your brain to find the balance among these three. Take the initiative to make some efforts, and the problem can be easily solved. Unfortunately, in her previous life, Linda was too selfish. She only thought about herself and was unwilling to make any concessions at all. This is the difference between me and her. Linda's body trembled with anger, and she glared at me resentfully. After a moment, she took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart. She sneered, Just you wait, Sarah, without Grandma by your side. Do you think academician Fiona will still choose you as her disciple in this life? You're dreaming. In this life, I will definitely live a better life than you. After Christmas, the weather suddenly turned cold. It rarely snowed in N City. Last time Linda said harsh words to me, and now she was going all out to please Charles. After all, getting Charles's love and becoming the fiancé of the young master of the James family was extremely glorious. This was an honor she didn't even dare to dream of in her previous life. As the new year approached, the school was also decorated with lanterns. Red lanterns were hung up, and the campus took on a new look. I knew that this was the effort made by the school leaders in terms of the environment to welcome the academician from the Academy of Agricultural Sciences to give a speech at the school, and I lived a 2.1-line life between school and home as usual. Occasionally, when Linda was not at home, I would go to visit Grandma. Such a life was very peaceful, and I liked it very much. However, since Jack didn't wait for me after school last time, he had been keeping a close eye on me. When I went to visit Grandma, this young master would sit in the car and condescendingly wait for me to come out. He claimed it was because he was afraid I would cause trouble. Who on earth was the one who would cause trouble? Sometimes when Jack got impatient with waiting, he would follow me into the house with a look of disgust. For a young master like Jack, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, it really seemed out of place to appear in this narrow rental house in the urban village. Grandma wiped her hands nervously, not knowing how to entertain him. Jack carefully wiped a small stool clean and sat down. Rarely, he didn't lose his temper. He held a disposable paper cup with 2 fingers in a finicky way and commented caustically, If I sit for a while longer, my rheumatism will act up. I glared at Jack. Young master, if you like to sit, sit. If not, get lost. Jack gave me a fierce look, but his butt seemed to be glued to the stool and he refused to move. It was not until I finished helping Grandma with the work that Jack slowly stood up. Grandma looked at Jack kindly and said cheerfully, Jack, come and play at home with Sarah next time. Jack coughed dryly and reluctantly forced a smile at Grandma. See you next time. When we walked out of the door, we met someone I didn't expect. Charles stood at the entrance of the alley with a gloomy face. A group of lackeys followed him, holding clubs in their hands. Charles stared at us and sneered sinisterly. Finally, I've caught you. He walked up slowly, with a look of contempt on his lips. You really picked a good place. There are no cameras and no people. He knocked on the long stick in his hand and said slowly, Even if I kill you today, no one will know. Charles had been following us. My eyes swept over, and I quickly sized up the number of people. I immediately made an estimate in my heart. Jack was a person who was not afraid of anything. He lifted his eyelids and coldly spat out 2 words at Charles, idiot. Hearing this, Charles was so angry that he laughed instead. Let's see today who is the idiot. I took a step back, elbowed Jack's arm, and whispered, Follow my lead. Jack raised his eyebrows in surprise. You can fight too. I stared at Charles, who was approaching step by step, and softly counted down, 3, 2, 1. Jack calmly said, Tell me who to beat. At the last moment, I grabbed Jack's hand and shouted sharply, Run. Jack was yanked away by me. He was shocked. Didn't you say we were going to fight back? I ran with ease, leading Jack to deftly dart around in the alleyways. While panting, I still had the strength to scold him. Are you crazy? There are 18 people on the other side, and there are only 2 of us. How can we fight? Having backbone is a good thing. But someone who can't judge the situation is a fool. My brain and hands are very important. My dream is to cultivate high-end wheat unique to country S. I can't get hurt. Jack let out a disdainful snort from his nose. Coward. But he wasn't really stupid enough to go back and fight Charles. After saying this, Jack fell silent. Fortunately, I had lived here for a long time and was very familiar with the terrain. I led Jack to a dead-end alley, stepped on the wall a few times and flipped over, and then quickly pulled Jack over. After hiding, I pulled Jack to squat down, put my ear against the wall, and listened as Charles's men cursed and ran away. Only then did I heave a sigh of relief. When I turned around, I saw Jack staring at me blankly. I frowned. What? He hesitated for a moment and muttered, "The way you flipped over the wall just now was quite cool." Linda made another scene. One night, she suddenly came to the Frank family's house, crying her eyes out. She held a camera in her hand and knocked on our door with a sobbing voice. "Sister, Grandma is sick. Go and see her quickly." Behind the camera's view, there was a malicious glint in Linda's eyes. She said softly and weakly, "Come with me, go and see Grandma quickly." Linda disliked the shabbiness of the house and had long since moved out of the rental house. She moved into the apartment rented for her by Charles with a clear conscience. She rarely went back. Even if Grandma was sick, could she have found out earlier than me? Moreover, I had just visited Grandma not long ago. She had a rosy complexion and was in good health. Linda's actions were undoubtedly like a weasel paying respects to a chicken. With ill intentions, I retrieved the surveillance video from Grandma's house, took a look, and after confirming that Grandma was safe and sound, I raised my hand to close the door. "Come on, sister, I can see that you have a lot of bad ideas in mind." Linda hurriedly blocked the door. She acted very anxiously. "I'm serious, sister. Grandma is really sick and just wants to see you at home." I sneered and sized up Linda. "Sister, act more convincingly next time, and I'll consider it." Jack came out from behind me. He lowered his eyelids and stared down at Linda, as if looking at an insignificant bug. He frowned in disgust. "Anyone and everyone can knock on our door now. Is the security just for show?" Jack pressed the call button and said in a cold voice, "Security, drive this person away." Linda was driven away by the security with a sobbing voice. Before leaving, the camera in her hand was always pointed in our direction. Linda looked at us from a distance with venomous eyes and mouthed silently, "You're finished." Finished with what? Did she really think I was stupid and couldn't see the phone she was holding so obviously? I just wanted this wind to blow harder, even harder. The higher one is held up, the harder they will fall. Of course, on the scheduled date, Academician Fiona arrived as promised. Since Academician Fiona was a well-known scholar at the Academy of Agricultural Sciences, when she arrived, many newspaper reporters came to the school together to interview her. Just as the principal respectfully invited Academician Fiona to visit the school together, Linda rushed over, crying and holding her phone. She knelt on the ground, grabbed the hem of Academician Fiona's dress while crying, and said with teary eyes, "Teacher, please help me. After my sister was adopted by the Frank family, she not only ignored the lives of me and Grandma, but also bullied me at school. I really have no way out." Academician Fiona was a very gentle elder. Seeing this, she quickly helped Linda up and asked with concern, "Child, what exactly happened? Who is your sister?" Linda sobbed and wiped her tears. "My sister is Sarah." Hearing this name, Academician Fiona was stunned for a moment, and her eyes gradually became sharp. She said softly, "Can you tell the teacher in detail what exactly happened?" The reporters following beside, seeing Linda rush in, had already reflexively raised their cameras. When they heard Linda mention bullying, their eyes lit up even more, and the red dots on the cameras kept flashing. They stared fixedly at Linda and all said gently, "Don't be afraid, child. We are reporters and will give you justice." Linda slowly raised her eyes, which were red from crying, and clicked on the video on her phone. That video was exactly the one from the other night when Linda came to the Frank family's house, crying and knocking on the door. As the video came to an end, the reporters said indignantly, "This is too much. How can she be so ungrateful? What about the bullying? What's going on?" Regarding the growth of teenagers, we attach great importance to campus violence cases. We must resolutely put an end to campus bullying and will never tolerate it. Dean Fan let out a soft breath and looked at the principal. "Please call the other child here. I want to hear her side of the story. Such a thing happened suddenly. The principal was sweating on his forehead and quickly asked someone to call me to the office. As soon as I entered the office, he severely scolded me. Sarah, even though you were adopted by the Frank family, classmate Linda is still your relative after all. How can you, just because you are now a child of a wealthy family, bully your sister? I stood opposite the principal, raised my eyes, smiled, and asked calmly and confidently, Principal, you mean that no one, no matter who they are, can bully their classmates on campus, right? The principal said loudly, Of course, this is a school, no matter what a student's family situation is. Once they enter the school, they are all students. The school will never tolerate anyone's campus bullying behavior. Hearing this, I smiled with satisfaction. Principal, I report that Charles has been bullying me on campus. As soon as these words were spoken, the whole room was in an uproar. Who didn't know that Charles was the young master of the James family in N City and had a noble status? He was a being not to be trifled with. In an instant, the reporters' cameras were all aimed at me again. Cold sweat dripped down the principal's forehead. He slapped the table hard. Nonsense. You haven't even explained clearly the matter of you bullying your classmates. So how can you falsely accuse classmate Charles out of thin air? I slowly retracted my gaze and sighed. First of all, the matter of me bullying Linda on campus is a false accusation against me. It simply doesn't exist. A look of obvious panic appeared on Linda's face. You're lying. She asked the principal to retrieve the surveillance video and dig out all the surveillance footage of me slapping her in the corridor. From the surveillance video, it could be clearly seen. I slapped Linda. The principal slapped the table and said sternly, Sarah, what do you have to explain? My eyes turned, and I shook my head. I admit that slapping Linda is a fact. This was a violent act on my part in an emergency, and I am willing to be punished. A look of pride appeared on Linda's face. I changed the subject. However, every time I got angry and slapped Linda, there was a reason. My brother Jack has bipolar disorder, so his emotions are unstable. But Linda spread the word at school that Jack is a madman. Her behavior undoubtedly made Jack's condition even worse. Moreover, Linda always called Jack a madman right in front of me. I raised my eyes and looked at everyone. Jack is a good brother. I can't tolerate him being slandered by Linda like this. Almost everyone in the school knew that Jack had bipolar disorder. Hearing this, the principal showed a thoughtful look. A reporter whispered, Indeed, having a physical conflict due to verbal disputes is also understandable and cannot be used as direct evidence of campus bullying. After listening to the whole story, Academician Fiona tapped the table and looked at me. So, what about what your sister said that you ignored your elderly grandma? What's going on with that? I nodded and looked straight at Academician Fiona. I said softly, Perhaps it would be more convincing if my grandma came forward to explain in person. Jack led Grandma into the office. On the way, Grandma had already heard the whole story. She looked at Linda with great disappointment, as if she couldn't understand why this child would do such a thing. Grandma choked up and said, Sarah is a good girl. She has been working with me in the field since she was a child and has never complained about hardship or tiredness. Her dry and aged hands groped around in her pocket and shakily took out a tightly wrapped cloth bag. When she opened it, there was a bank card inside. Grandma slowly stroked the bank card with her hand, and tears streamed down her eyes. After Sarah was adopted by the Frank family, she came to see me every month and saved up all her pocket money for this old woman to use. She was worried about my health. Even though she was very busy with her studies, she often came back to see me and help me with the work. Sister, Grandma's cloudy eyes filled with tears, and she said guiltily, Is it because Grandma has a low education level and couldn't teach you well? How could you lie and slander your sister like this? Listening to Grandma's words, Linda's face turned pale. She kept shaking her head. What are you talking about, Grandma? How come I never knew that Sarah went to see you? Linda forced a smile. Don't lie to everyone to protect Sarah. Grandma staggered a couple of steps and was about to kneel down in front of everyone shakily. This old woman can guarantee that Sarah is really a good child. She has never done anything harmful. Don't be harsh on the child. Seeing Grandma's actions, I immediately stepped forward and held Grandma up. Grandma broke free from my hand, knelt down, and kowtowed to everyone. She cried, It's my fault that I didn't teach Linda well. Please don't blame her. The reporter's eyes lit up. Having seen many scenes, they knew exactly what was going on. They could tell who was telling the truth and who was lying at a glance. I helped Grandma stand up and looked at Linda with a sneer. Of course you don't know that I often go back to visit Grandma, because the family was poor and moved out a long time ago. Ask yourself, How many times have you visited Grandma in the 6 months since you moved out? Because I was worried that Grandma's health was not good and that if she fell ill or got sick, there would be no one to take care of her. I installed cameras at home. Looking at Linda's face turning paler and paler, I said coldly, "You would definitely have noticed these things if you had been at home, but, do you know?" I retrieved the camera and brought up the surveillance records saved on my phone before. In the video, Linda rarely went home, and every time she went back, she rummaged through Grandma's things to find her bank book and asked Grandma for money arrogantly. Fortunately, I had told Grandma in advance, so she hid the bank card I gave her very well. That's why Linda didn't find it. In the video, Linda impatiently pushed Grandma and cursed, "Old hag, you're really a waste of life. You can't even come up with any money, what's the point of me staying by your side?" And Grandma, pushed by Linda, stumbled and fell to the ground, and could only apologize, "I'm sorry, it's Grandma who is useless and can't earn any money." When I saw these videos before, I was already furious. I rushed to Grandma's house overnight and took Grandma to the hospital for a check-up. Fortunately, nothing serious happened, and now, all the evidence left in the video has become a sharp blade stabbing at Linda. Since I entered the door just now, Linda had secretly set up her phone on the bookcase. Her phone was live, streaming and had been recording from the very beginning. Her original intention was to stir up conflict and make netizens scold me, but she didn't expect that things would reverse so quickly. She was quietly blocked by me, and she didn't have a chance to turn off the live stream at all. Netizens went from pitying Linda and scolding me at the beginning, to being speechless when the situation reversed, and then to seeing these last videos. Their attitude changed completely, and they started cursing Linda. "So speechless, what a disgusting innocent-looking bitch, pretending to be innocent. I thought she stayed with Grandma because she loved her. Turns out she just wanted to suck the old woman's blood. Eat the old woman's bones, such a bitch. I just spoke up for her. I regret it so much." Academician Fiona helped Grandma sit down and said softly, "Sister Lucy, take a break and have some water." Grandma used to be an auxiliary worker in Academician Fiona's research laboratory, helping the department dig the soil and plant the land. In the previous life, Academician Fiona remembered the elderly Grandma. After the speech, she specially visited Grandma and accidentally discovered that I had a lot of talent in agriculture. Therefore, after I worked hard and was admitted to an agricultural school, I became Academician Fiona's disciple. In this life, Linda wanted to prevent me from meeting Academician Fiona and didn't want me to continue on the path of the previous life. But I was well prepared. I sorted out my thesis early and sent it to Academician Fiona's email. After reading my thesis ideas, Academician Fiona was greatly surprised. We added each other's contact information. She learned about my situation, and we made an appointment to meet on the day of the speech. So when Linda rushed in crying, as soon as Academician Fiona heard my name, she decided to understand the actual situation in person before drawing a conclusion, and the development of things really lived up to her expectations. When she looked at me again, Academician Fiona smiled gently. "Sarah, you are really a good child. I didn't misjudge you." After a pause, she turned to look at the principal and said sternly, "The misunderstandings about classmate Sarah have all been explained clearly. Now, it's time to call Charles over and talk about the problem of his campus bullying, right?" Seeing this situation, the principal's cold sweat kept dripping, and the more he wiped, the more there was. I smiled. Of course, words alone are not enough. We can definitely look at the surveillance video first. When this was mentioned, Linda almost couldn't stand, but I calmly opened the surveillance video and showed all the scenes of Charles leading people to block me, which were captured by the camera, in detail. Of course I'm not as stupid as Linda, being so blatant and making a big fuss. I understand the principle of biding my time. If I do something, I want to be the eagle that strikes with a fatal blow. Today, I'm going to solve everything at once. Charles bullied me, and this is a fact, and today, all the elite reporters from the N City newspapers came with Academician Fiona. For sensitive topics like wealthy family bullying, they are like wolves that have smelled blood. Their eyes suddenly shine with red light. They won't stop until they tear off a piece of flesh. Charles, even though he is the most noble young master of the James family, no one can protect him, as I expected. The development of things was just like that. With the evidence, this was almost a certainty. The reporters widely publicized the fact that Charles bullied his classmates. Overnight, the stock of the James group dropped sharply, and even Charles didn't come to school for several days. I was worried that Charles would take crazy revenge on me. Those days, I was very obedient. I went to and from school on time and didn't dare to stay outside for a single moment, but inevitably, I still ran into Charles at school. In these few days, he had become extremely haggard, his eyes were dark and there were dark circles under them. He stopped me. "Sarah, let's talk." I looked around vigilantly to make sure there were classmates around, and then said warily, "I have nothing to talk to you about." Charles ignored me. He lowered his head and lit a cigarette. He put it in his mouth. After the nicotine circulated in his lungs for a while, he shook off the ash and then slowly said, "The alley where I had people block you is the place where your grandma lives." I frowned. I didn't know why Charles asked this. I said defensively, "Don't you dare look for trouble with my grandma. I've already picked her up and taken her away. She's now in a place where none of you can find her." Hearing my answer, Charles sneered, threw the cigarette butt on the ground, and stomped it out. "I didn't want to take revenge on you." He was silent for a moment and then murmured, "For so long. I actually never realized that Linda said she cared about Grandma, but she never went back to visit her." Charles closed his eyes tightly and let out a breath. "I can see clearly. This is the retribution I deserve. I hated you before because I thought you were greedy for money and a snobbish, ungrateful person. My dad is like that. He killed my mom, so I've always hated this kind of person the most. But now I realize that I'm just a fool, being played around by others and still claiming to be just." Charles pursed his lips. He lowered his head a little stiffly and apologized to me. "I'm sorry, Sarah." Looking at Charles like this, I calmly took 2 steps back. "Don't be cheap. If an apology worked, what would we need the police for?" After that, I turned around and left without looking back. Charles stood behind me, quietly watching my leaving back, and he said softly, "Just think of me as being cheap." I heard that Charles dumped Linda. Not long after, there was a rumor that Linda was pregnant. She went to the James family, crying and making a scene, demanding that the James family take responsibility. Unfortunately, it wasn't Charles who dealt with her, but his father. Charles's father had a very bad temper because the stock market had suffered heavy losses. Now, seeing Linda, the culprit who had caused Charles's scandal, to be exposed, he felt even more disgusted. When he faced Linda, he was still smiling, but the words he said were merciless. "You're pregnant. How do you know it's my son's? A woman like you." Charles's father sized up Linda leisurely. She was good looking, with a small face and round eyes. She had been a beauty since she was a child. Therefore, in both her previous life and this life, she delusionally thought that she could capture a man with her looks. Unfortunately, in her previous life, she went against Jack and was tortured terribly, and in this life, Charles saw through Linda's true face and was extremely disgusted with her. After sizing her up, Charles's father sneered, with just a wave of the hand, "There will be a large number of them. Who do you think you are?" Charles's father waved his hand, extremely disgusted. "Drag her away, abort the fetus, and then send her wherever she should be sent." Linda was forced to have an abortion. In just a few days, she became extremely thin, and her cheeks were sunken. Grandma heard about this and just felt heartbroken, blaming herself for not teaching Linda well. But I knew clearly that all of this was Linda's own doing. I didn't want Grandma to be sad, so I agreed to visit Linda in the hospital for her. Linda was lying on the hospital bed, looking at me with empty eyes. She murmured, why, even in this new life, my ending is still so tragic. Why can't I compete with you?" I looked at her from a distance, expressionless. "Your biggest mistake is placing your hopes on others. In the previous life, you wanted to rely on the Frank family to become a young lady. Unfortunately, they adopted a daughter with ulterior motives, so you couldn't accept it. You didn't consider Jack's condition at all and went against the people of the Frank family. In a vicious cycle, Jack hated you even more. In this life, you wanted to rely on Charles's love to become a rich wife. Unfortunately, the you that Charles liked was all a disguise. You could pretend for a while, but you couldn't pretend for a lifetime. You clearly could have chosen a path more suitable for yourself. Sister, the biggest difference between you and me is that I never rely on others and only place my hopes on myself." Hearing my words, Linda was stunned for a moment. She shook her head with a pale face. Stubbornly, she said, "I'm different from you." "Different?" Linda shouted hoarsely and asked someone to drive me out. Later, I heard that after Linda recovered, she frequently went in and out of places like bars and dance halls, which were full of luxury and dissipation. With her looks, she did hook up with quite a few rich men, but those men were just playing with her. After they got tired of her, they quickly abandoned her. None of them were willing to marry her. They despised her and said, "You're just a whore who has been slept with by thousands of people. If it weren't for your good-looking face, I wouldn't be willing to take you in." In just a few months, Linda was forced to have an abortion many times. The last time, she met Charles in a bar. Looking at Charles, who was being crowded in the middle by everyone, Linda's eyes were bloodshot. She picked up a knife and walked towards Charles. Charles was stabbed dozens of times and was immediately sent to the emergency room. His life was hanging by a thread, and Linda was arrested and imprisoned for intentional injury. I saw this news when I was checking my grades. The news was pushed on the webpage. The college entrance examination was over. Jack did well in the exam and his scores were enough for him to enter a good university in N City, and I was the top scorer in science in this city. My goal was clear. It was the agricultural school that academician Fiona had attended after the college entrance examination. My task of taking care of Jack was also completed. I decided to say goodbye to the Frank family. I took out a card. "This is the bonus I got from participating in competitions and inventing patents during high school. I also saved all the pocket money you gave me." I was adopted by the Frank family only to repay the kindness they had shown to Grandma back then. Now, it was time to leave. Hearing my words, Jack clenched his fists. He couldn't believe it. "You're leaving." I smiled and comforted him. "Jack, no one will always be by your side. You have to learn to say goodbye." Now, Jack's condition was well controlled, and his bipolar disorder rarely flared up. Moreover, my eyes softened. I have my own dream, and I'm going to pursue my dream. My dream was to cultivate high-end wheat, so that the people of Country S could have their own high-end agricultural products, so that food would not rely on foreign imports, so that people would give priority to choosing local food, so that domestic agricultural products could achieve high quality and high prices, and so that farmers could make money. I have had a dream since I was a child. The agricultural products that Grandma worked so hard to grow would no longer be sold at low prices. In the previous life, I had already cultivated the wheat variety I dreamed of, and now, all of this was still just a vision. Currently, in the international market, Country S lacks high-end agricultural products. Although it is a large agricultural country, it is also the world's largest importer of agricultural products. Moreover, in Country S, except for the Northeast Plain and a small number of other areas where mechanized production and planting can be achieved, most areas are mountains and hills and cannot achieve complete mechanization. I believe that with my previous experience, not only can I cultivate the ideal wheat variety in advance, but I can also make better improvements to make it a high quality and high-end wheat that is more suitable for Country S. However, I didn't expect that on the day of the school start. Jack, carrying a suitcase, lazily appeared in front of me. I was a bit stunned and asked, "Why are you here?" He put his arm around my shoulder, lifted his eyelids, and said, "Your big brother can't bear to see his little sister drifting alone outside, so I decided to apply to the school next to yours to protect you." Jack pushed me and walked out, saying, "Go and help me fill out the forms quickly. There are so many people there. I get a headache when there are too many people." Taking advantage of my hands being occupied, Jack casually stuffed a bank card into my bag. He smiled flirtatiously and said, "The Frank family is rich. It's not like we can't afford to raise you. A little kid. What are you being so picky about? Finally having a little sister who is a top student. The whole family can't wait to dote on you. How could we bear to see you living like an ascetic all day long?" "Don't worry." Jack ruffled the top of my hair and said, "I've had someone bring Grandma to our home. There will be people to take good care of her. Once a brother, always a brother. Your big brother will protect you for a lifetime. Just rest assured." At the age of 25, following academician Fiona, our team successfully cultivated high-end and high-quality wheat. It has a high yield, good taste, and is easy to plant. In just a few years, the high-quality wheat of Country S has been selling well globally, relying on the high patent fees collected from the seeds and the profits from exporting agricultural products. The agriculture of Country S has been developing better and better. Since agriculture can make money, more and more people are devoting themselves to agricultural production. When I was 29 years old, at the scene of the award presentation ceremony for the Top Science and Technology Award, our entire team was nominated to commend the huge contribution we made to agriculture in the field of wheat. Grandma was sitting in the audience, secretly wiping her tears. She clapped excitedly and said with a smile, "Sarah, I'm proud of you." Jack looked at me with a smile and congratulated me. "Congratulations, little sister, your dream has come true." I walked towards them. Behind me, there was thunderous applause and the flashlights kept flashing. I know that with the continuous strengthening of agriculture, the future of Country S will have a more solid and powerful guarantee. Country S will always strive for self-improvement. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.